Officer Jeffrey Humphreys had been patrolling the neighborhood all morning, the chilly air nipping at his exposed skin. Hungry and tired, he decided to stop at a quaint diner for a quick lunch break. As he sat down, he noticed the hustle and bustle of the diner, people chatting, plates clinking. He had no idea just how his day was about to unfold. After his usual waitress took his order, all of a sudden, a small figure darted towards his table, catching him off guard. It was a 4-year-old boy, his eyes wide with urgency. Before Jeffrey could react, the boy leaned in close and whispered something in his ear. At first, Jeffrey couldn't make out what the boy was saying amidst the din of the diner. Officer Humphreys looked up at the boy. His eyes looked sad and scared. He tried to make out what the boy was saying. When the words finally registered, it sent a chill down Jeffrey's spine. The boy's whisper was desperate, and Officer Humphreys knew that he had to step in and do something. Jeffrey's heart raced as he realized the gravity of the situation. Officer Jeffrey Humphreys was a dedicated cop in the city of Cleveland, Ohio. Not a day went by that he wouldn't come across the harsh realities that people faced. Day after day, he would be called out to either a crime scene or a domestic issue. Problems were rife in the city, and it was up to him and his colleagues to make sure everything was in order. In all his years of being a police officer for the Cleveland Division of Police, Officer Humphreys had seen his fair share of everything. He knew that when he first trained as a police officer, he had to be ready to face some harsh truths when it came to the human race. People were cruel and heartless, and Officer Humphreys had experienced this firsthand. It was all very heartbreaking, but he had to be tough for the victims who needed him, even more so when some victims would approach him on his lunch break. One minute, Officer Humphreys was enjoying his cheeseburger when he heard a small voice trying to get his attention. He didn't see it coming. He had walked into his favorite diner like he always did at 1 p.m. sharp. The waitresses always expected him and always kept his favorite booth reserved for him. If Officer Humphreys didn't come for his usual lunch, they knew it was because he was probably out on a case and that he would come by later in the day. But this would be a day like no other. It was a bright and sunny day, and as he walked into the diner, he was greeted with smiles and respectful nods from his fellow patrons. Everyone knew Officer Humphreys, and they respected him for what he did for their community. The diner was really busy as usual as a waitress ushered him to his usual booth. However, rather than have his regular soda with his meal as he always did, he wanted to treat himself to a thick chocolate milkshake instead. As he opened up his newspaper, Officer Humphreys liked to do a general sweep of the diner. He just wanted to see if everything was safe. It was a habit that he had. There were the usual familiar faces that he would always see, plus some new ones. It looked like it could be families that were passing through. The chatter of the diner provided a comforting backdrop to his routine. He scanned the faces, nodding at the regulars and exchanging pleasantries. But then, amidst the usual hubbub, something unexpected happened. Officer Humphreys would have never guessed that something like this would happen during his lunch break. Just as he was about to tuck into his delicious cheeseburger, he felt someone tugging on his jacket. When he looked down, he saw a timid-looking little boy staring at him with wide eyes. "Hello, little fellow. What can I do for you today?" However, before the boy could say anything, he ran back to the booth that he was sharing with what looked like his father. Officer Humphreys looked at the boy as he scrambled back to the booth, a terrified look on his face. Just then, the boy's father came back from the restroom. The boy continued to eat his food while discreetly looking at Officer Humphreys. At that moment, Officer Humphreys just waved at the boy, not knowing what was really going on. After finishing up his burger, Officer Humphreys sipped on his chocolate milkshake. It was delicious. But not long after that moment, Officer Humphreys once again felt the tugging motion on his jacket. When he looked down, The same little boy was once again there at his side. The boy's eyes were teary this time, and Officer Humphreys could no longer ignore him. "Hey, son, what's going on? Are you all right? Why are you so sad?" he asked. However, the boy didn't say anything. At that moment, Officer Humphreys' instincts kicked into high gear. Something didn't seem right. When he looked over at the booth where the boy was, his father was there, but he was so preoccupied with his phone that he hadn't noticed that his own son had disappeared. Just when Officer Humphreys was about to get up and take the boy back to his father, the boy whispered something, but it was so soft that he couldn't even make out what was being said. "Pardon me, little fella. You're going to have to speak up. I can't hear a thing that you're saying to me." But the boy remained quiet again, making it very difficult for Officer Humphreys. He decided to let the boy sit down. He ordered another chocolate milkshake for the boy to enjoy. Perhaps that would get him to speak up. It seemed like the boy had something he wanted to get off of his chest. Something was bothering him, and Officer Humphreys wanted to know what it was. Officer Humphreys stared at the boy. He couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in his gut that something was off. The boy appeared calm and collected, but there was a subtle tenseness to him that he didn't like. It was in his posture that made the officer uneasy. Despite his unease, Humphreys had no idea what the boy was hiding. Then he realized that it was something that was right in front of him, waiting to be revealed. The boy had a look of fear in his eyes, but it was because of what he had in his pocket. The boy appeared to be on the verge of tears, but he seemed to recognize the badge that the police officer wore and knew that he could come to him for safety. Officer Humphreys couldn't help but wonder what it was that the boy was trying to escape from. Was he being chased by someone, or was he lost? As a responsible officer, it was his duty to find out and ensure the boy's safety, but he had no idea what he was getting involved in. The boy seemed to be enjoying the milkshake, but there was more going on. Humphreys couldn't help but notice that the boy was acting a bit suspiciously. While sipping his drink, the boy kept checking his pockets. He did so every few moments as if he were worried about something. Most people wouldn't have suspected anything was wrong, but Humphreys' extensive training and experience in law enforcement told him that something was amiss. The officer's intuition and attention to detail were on high alert. He needed to try to figure out what was going on with the boy. Officer Humphreys knew that he needed to tread carefully. He had to gain the boy's trust before he could get to the root of the problem. With a calm and reassuring tone, he asked the boy if everything was okay, but he could tell that there was more to the story. He decided to take a different approach and ask the boy directly if he was hiding something from him. It was important for him not to scare the boy into doing something drastic. He needed to establish a rapport with the boy and let him know that he was there to help, but he also needed to get to the bottom of the situation quickly to ensure the boy's safety. Officer Humphreys, with a stern expression on his face, decided to confront the boy without hesitation. He knew that time was of the essence in a situation like this, and he hoped that the boy would come clean and explain everything. The boy's eyes darted nervously around as the officer asked, "Are you hiding something from me?" His heart racing, the boy hesitated for a moment before slowly reaching into his pocket. The officer watched intently, his hand hovering over his weapon. He was unsure of what was about to be revealed. As the boy slowly pulled out the object he was hiding in the blink of an eye, the officer's expression changed from suspicion to shock and disbelief. The young boy stood frozen in place as his eyes locked onto the police officer in front of him. He was trembling with fear, and his heart was pounding in his chest. The officer, Humphreys, could see the panic in the boy's eyes, and he knew he needed to try to calm him down. But before he could even utter a word, the unthinkable happened. The boy had a small object in his hand. It was the same one that he had been hiding. Humphreys knew immediately that this was not going to end well. Fear gripped him as he tried to figure out what to do next. The situation had escalated quickly, and he knew that he was now in grave danger. In that crucial moment, the officer found himself in a difficult position. He had to make a decision quickly, and yet it was not an easy one to make. According to the protocol, he was supposed to use force in response to any perceived threat, but the person in front of him was just a boy. He wouldn't be able to look at himself in the mirror if anything happened to the boy. The officer knew that he had a responsibility to ensure the safety of everyone involved, including the boy himself. He realized that it might require him to disobey his orders. He had to ignore protocol if that was what it took to avoid any harm. So, instead of reacting instinctively, he took a moment to observe and assess the situation. He tried to gauge if the boy was holding something dangerous or not. Until he could confirm that there was a real threat, he refused to treat the boy as an enemy. He remained calm and collected, determined to resolve the situation with minimal harm to anyone involved. The officer's eyes fixed on a silver locket that caught his attention. He couldn't believe what he saw, a glimmering piece of jewelry that seemed out of place in the boy's possession. Had the young boy stolen it? Was that why he was hiding it from him? After a moment of their crafting in his head, he decided that the way the boy looked at the locket meant it was too important to merely be stolen. Humphreys heaved a sigh of relief, hoping that the unexpected discovery would make things easier for him. However, he soon realized that it was just the beginning of his troubles. The young boy, evidently nervous and fidgety, explained that he liked to hold the locket whenever he felt anxious or upset. It was something that caught the officer off guard. The officer couldn't help but chuckle, but he knew that there was more to the situation than met the eye. But he had no idea what secrets were inside the metal object. As the boy gazed at the locket, his eyes filled with longing. He opened it slowly, revealing its contents to Officer Humphreys. The boy flipped the locket over in the direction of Humphreys. The officer leaned in to take a closer look and saw that on one side of the locket was a picture of the boy himself sitting in front of him. But on the other half of the locket was a picture of a woman he had never seen before. Her features were strikingly beautiful, but her expression was solemn and distant. "Is that your mom?" Officer Humphreys asked in a gentle voice. The boy's reaction was all he needed to know that something was very wrong. It looked like sadness started rising up inside the young boy as he heard the question that Officer Humphreys asked him. He knew that he shouldn't have pried. "You can tell me if you want, but if you aren't comfortable with talking about it, I understand," Officer Humphreys said in his reassuring tone. But things were about to take a turn. After a few minutes, the boy finally calmed down. He was holding the locket tightly the entire time, an indicator that something terrible had happened regarding his mother. Humphreys knew better than to rush the child. Once he had calmed down, maybe then he could give him the info he needed. The boy put the locket away now that Officer Humphreys was satisfied he didn't have any weapons or contraband. It was clear that the boy was innocent of any crime, but what else had happened to him? There was still the pressing problem at hand. What had upset the boy? The officer wouldn't be entirely satisfied until he knew the truth. Little did he know that he was going to find out, but it would turn his world upside down. It would change everything Humphreys believed in. It was his job, after all. And it was no coincidence that the little boy had come to his booth twice in one day. He was a smart boy, and Officer Humphreys wanted to help him if he indeed needed it. He watched as the boy lit up at the sight of the milkshake. He knew he had done something good. Hopefully now the boy would have the confidence to talk to him. Not once had the boy's father even looked up from his phone to see that the boy was no longer in front of him. Officer Humphreys just shook his head. In what world does a parent not care where their child is? Officer Humphreys decided it was time to talk. "What's your name, son?" he asked, hoping the boy would at least give him his name. When the boy finally looked at him, he knew he was going to speak. "My name is Joey. I'm 4 years old. I'll be 5 in a few months. I'm going to be a big boy." Officer Humphreys smiled at Joey. He was a smart kid indeed, but he couldn't ignore the fact that something was wrong. Why had he come to his booth in the first place? "Joey, is there something you want to tell me? Are you scared about something? You can tell me. I promise that you won't be in trouble. I just want to help you." It was then Joey froze up again. Officer Humphreys saw the change in demeanor and body language. It was then that Joey looked up at him and uttered some chilling words. "I want my mommy. Daddy took me this morning. I want to go home to my mommy." Officer Humphreys immediately radioed for backup. Something was about to go down in this diner. As Joey's words hung in the air, Officer Humphreys felt his heart race. The innocence in the boy's voice juxtaposed with the gravity of his statement sent a chill down his spine. He glanced over at the boy's father, who was still engrossed in his phone, oblivious to the unfolding situation. With a sense of urgency, Officer Humphreys gently placed a hand on Joey's shoulder. "Don't worry, Joey. We're going to help you find your mommy," he reassured him, his mind already formulating a plan to handle the delicate situation. The atmosphere in the diner had shifted. Conversations dwindled to whispers as patrons began to sense the tension emanating from Officer Humphreys' booth. Eyes darted between the officer and the little boy, speculation mounting as to what could be happening. Officer Humphreys kept a watchful eye on Joey's father, who still seemed oblivious to the unfolding drama. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing, and Officer Humphreys knew he had to act swiftly to ensure Joey's safety. Within minutes, backup arrived at the diner, responding to Officer Humphreys' urgent call. As fellow officers entered the diner, they assessed the situation, their expressions mirroring the gravity of the moment. Officer Humphreys briefed his colleagues quickly, conveying Joey's distress and his suspicions regarding his father. Together, they formulated a plan to approach the situation with caution, prioritizing Joey's well-being above all else. With a collective breath, Officer Humphreys and his fellow officers approached Joey's father, who looked up in surprise at the sudden commotion. Sensing the tension in the air, he instinctively reached out for Joey, but Officer Humphreys intervened, gently but firmly guiding the boy away from his father's grasp. "Sir, we need to ask you some questions," Officer Humphreys said, his voice calm yet authoritative. But as they began to question Joey's father, his demeanor grew defensive, casting a shadow of doubt over the situation. Amidst the interrogation, a shocking revelation came to light. Joey's father, it turned out, was involved in a custody dispute with Joey's mother. He had taken Joey without her consent, intending to keep him away from her indefinitely. The realization sent shockwaves through the diner, disbelief evident on the faces of patrons who had been unwitting witnesses to the unfolding drama. But for Officer Humphreys, there was no time to dwell on the disbelief. He had a duty to uphold the law and ensure Joey's safe return to his mother. With the truth laid bare, Officer Humphreys and his fellow officers wasted no time in taking action. Joey was swiftly reunited with his mother, who tearfully embraced her son, grateful for his safe return. As the scene unfolded, Officer Humphreys couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Despite the chaos and uncertainty, he had helped bring about a resolution, ensuring that justice prevailed and a family was reunited. As Officer Humphreys left the diner that day, the events of the afternoon weighed heavily on his mind. The innocence of childhood, juxtaposed with the harsh realities of the world, served as a poignant reminder of why he had chosen to wear the badge. But amidst the turmoil and drama, there was also hope. Hope that by standing up for what was right, he could make a difference, one small act of kindness at a time. And as he headed back out onto the streets, ready to resume his patrol, Officer Humphreys knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he would always be ready to answer the call of duty, to protect and serve the community he held dear. He was so glad that he could help Joey in his time of need by recognizing his signs of distress.